In TFT, one of the most fun reroll comps in the game right now is Warwick Reroll. With each takedown, he gets permanent attack speed, which helps him get further takedowns and infinitely scale. But everyone says you can't play Warwick without a specific artifact, Corrupt Vampiric Scepter. However, in this episode of In Too Deep, one of North America's top players, Wasianiverson, puts on a dog and pony show and proved that that's not exactly true. Here's how he did it. We're going to hop on board with Wasianiverson, who's one of the most successful North American players of all time. In just 4 sets since he started competing, Wasian's made it to the World Championship 3 times out of 4, which is incredible consistency in a powerhouse region like North America, which might come as a big surprise, especially if you're watching North America play League of Legends Worlds these days. But I promise you, North America is one of the top regions in TFT. Wasian is playing on Castfest and starting off with a Infinity Edge. Now, a lot of people would think about starting a spots to try and play Varus from here, but it looks like he is going to be queuing up and playing some Warwick. And I think he's sort of on a Warwick kick because he has a duplicator. It's Castfest. Castfest is lending itself to reroll strategies because the more you roll, the more you're likely to see cheap charms. And a lot of charms ends up being a good way to get gold. And so if you ever are on Castfest, it's just generally a pretty good portal for rerolling. Taking a look at our augments here, Practice Partners is only for mages, and it's also an augment that I think is much better later in the game if you do have mages, but not very good early, so I think that's a no. Big Gains is a really interesting one because it does give Warwick a lot of scaling, and he ends up just getting a lot of takedowns in general. Also, Big Gains is better when you have a unit that's on your board already that you want to permanently stack. It's worse when you have Big Gains and you want to play around, say, a 4 cost because you're not going to get that 4 cost for a while. And so you don't really get a lot of that stacking HP. But if you start with like a really powerful 3 cost, like I really love Big Gains Wukong, for example. Big Gains Warwick, because you're trying to carry him early, can actually be pretty good. So I actually think that it's not a bad pick at all, even though it's not conventionally who you think about when you have Big Gains. 2 Tanky is also pretty interesting because you could play 2 copies of Warwick and reroll it. But part of the reason why 2 Tanky works for, say, Honeymancy is because you get extra copies of bees based off the honey units that die. You don't get a similar benefit for that for playing Vanguards and Frost for Warwick. So I don't think it's nearly as good as it is for something like Ziggs, for example. He sees Spellblades and Long Distance Palace, but that's not going to be a pick. So he's going to go ahead and choose Big Gains and get things started. He clicks Crystal Ball, sees his next matchup. The advantage of using a Crystal Ball at the very beginning of the game is just to get information on where you're more likely to get snipes with Warwick. You do actually end up caring a lot about how many kills you can get with Warwick. You have to remember that's like a compounding snowball effect. The more kills Warwick gets, the more likely he is to get takedowns and kills, which gives him more stacks. Wait a second. He looked over and someone else has Big Gains Warwick as well. I don't think he's contested, but that would be hilarious if we just happen to stumble upon the one time he's contested. Slams Infinity Edge. Really interesting. This Infinity Edge is quite a powerful item for Twitch, and he ends up getting a nice win here. So looks like he's off to a pretty good start. He also has Twitch pair on top of Twitch too. So it looks like he's going to go for Twitch reroll as well. And I think that Twitch is a lot better now. I think Twitch might borderline just be OP as a 1 cost, especially with AD items, because he ends up doing so much AoE. Like his piercing shot actually ends up hitting multiple targets. And because he picks a better line, he ends up hitting 2 units consistently while sniping even backline potentially. Generally speaking, his early game is just hyper focused on just trying to snipe some of these units though. So for the most part, we're just going to be watching Wasian lose, like win, lose, depending on who he hits. And he's just going to try to make gold every single round, but it looks like he can't really make 10 here because he needs to hold on to all these extra units. There is debate about whether or not you want to actually go for Twitch 3. When you have these many Twitches this early and the fact that you have an Infinity Edge committed to the Twitch, I think you do want to actually go for Twitch 3. So the most common build that you end up going for with Warwick is Vanguards. You want to go 6 Vanguard because that just gives Warwick the most amount of tankiness. And you want to scale him because he wants to play things like Rageblade. In order to get his attack speed at full capacity, you just need to stall out the fight as long as possible, which is what 6 Vanguard ends up doing. All right, looks like we are on that like win, lose, win, which is not ideal, but that's okay. I mean, it is what it is. On Carousel here, Wasian doesn't actually have that many good components open. He only has a belt, and that doesn't really make that many good items for Warwick. He ends up taking a cloak here. And so I would say that this is like a start where the Warwick items aren't actually exactly obvious. There's no artifact that makes you think like, oh my gosh, it has to be a Warwick game. And that's what makes this really, really interesting. He slams Even Shroud, and Even Shroud is also good because Warwick does a lot of physical damage. He's just an auto attacker. So anytime you have someone that attacks a lot, things like Even Shroud and Last Whisper are really crucial. Part of what makes Even Shroud better than Last Whisper, though, is that his first bow has to be committed to his Rage Blade. And so if you want to have armor reduction, you actually need to have 2 bows if you want to make Last Whisper. Not to mention that Twitch also actually sunders in his ability. So it's not nearly as crucial for him to have something like Last Whisper on his Twitch because he might actually contribute to that. And I think Even Shroud is just better for his item economy. All right, so we're on 2 win, and we're going against Fairy here. So there's going to be a Callista player. This could be a potentially bad matchup for Warwick into the lobby. You do end up having difficulty with super tanks. If Warwick can't get past like a Rakan 2, that might be a big struggle point. But there are some tricks that you can do to get around it. We'll just see if he ends up using any of them. Anything from like having the right artifact items to charms. There are some things that you can do. If you do end up finding a support anvil of some kind, I highly recommend Zephyr for this comp because that's the one way you could get around things like the Rakan. Because Zephyr, a solo frontline Rakan just in the front center, then you just get to the back line and you kill everything, and then you can gang up on the Rakan. Okay, so he drops a bow and a vest and a rod. That's actually huge. So now he can actually go for a Rage Blade immediately. He ends up buying a 0 cost charm and he sunders and shreds for the next few seconds. And this is because I think he doesn't actually want to roll very much right now. So a lot of times when you're re-rolling, you're thinking about what charms you want to buy. And in a lot of cases, you want to roll for an econ charm. In this case, he's actually trying to stay above 40 and get up to 50 gold and slow roll above 50 because he's so far away from Warwick. A lot of times in the past, we would encourage people to roll to like 30 because 30 would make 40 and 50 by the time, you know, you get back into the middle of stage 3. But with charms, you actually want to have more gold than usual. So I highly recommend actually staying at 40 right now for 1 cost reroll. Unless you're really close to a bunch of 1 cost, then you can send it and try to hit that 3-star as soon as you can. Okay, new recruit, Support Golem, and Tiniest Titan. I think Support Golem is the best overall prismatic because there's just so many powerful things that can get Warwick rolling. You can get things like a Banshee's Veil, you can get Knight's Vow, you can get a Zeke's and a Locket. Like, there's a lot of different things you can get. Not to mention the Zephyr that we mentioned. So I don't think it's 1 or 3. I don't think a maximum team size matters that much. And the duplicator is better value for like things like 4 and 5 costs, and we're playing around 1 cost. Tiny Titan is not really effective here unless we're trying to specifically lose streak for a huge payoff of some kind. I would say Tiny Titan makes sense if you're playing Fortune, but not really in this spot. So we roll 1 and 3. Interestingly enough, he has What the Forge, and What the Forge is actually quite a powerful potential augment. I mean, for one thing, it could be Corrupt Vampiric Scepter. It could also be, you know, Rapid Fire Cannon, some of these like other really insane artifacts for Warwick. But it's also a huge gamble. And he's already pretty mentally committed to this reroll. So I would say that What the Forge is like very risky, but the payoff in the ceiling is immensely high. A movable object is also quite good. In fact, the movable object and Support Golem are similar in the sense that you just want to like have a bunch of support aura items with it, and movable object ends up being quite good for Warwick because you just kind of want to keep him clumped anyways. So I could see a case for actually all 3 of these. I think it's actually just a straight up risk tolerance thing. Immovable object is the least risky. Support Golem is medium risk because it's a possibility he gets a bad golem, and What the Forge is the highest risk but the highest amount of upside. So it's actually quite an interesting prismatic choice here. He's flirting with the idea of What the Forge versus Support Golem. So it looks like he ends up going for Support Golem. And he gets Knight's Vow with Martyr, which is not actually that bad. Because Knight's Vow gives, you know, the health and the Omnivamp to Warwick, which helps. You know, it makes you feel like you don't need, like, the Bloodthirster and stuff like that. And quite frankly, I don't think Bloodthirster is, like, that good on Warwick. You just care about, like, the actual tanky stats for him. So it's just a pretty solid Support Golem in general. But I do think it's like disappointing because I think it'd be really cool to see a What the Forge Warwick. That's okay though, because the whole point of this is to show what happens if you don't hit an artifact on a Warwick. Notice that he was rolling right after he picked that because he wanted to roll until a charm. Generally, you always want to roll until a charm, and you want to see if you can pick up like a good econ charm of some kind. He rolls and finds an Olaf. Frosty Fortitude is not that good for this comp. Usually Winter Ice Soldiers are just better based off of how many Frosts you have, and he's right now playing only 3 Frost. Not to mention that it costs him a gold, so if he wins this fight, it's entirely possible that he just like causes himself to miss Interest Threshold if he loses. So yeah, I think this is good. All right, now he's already starting to scale. He has how many Warwicks? I think he has 6 Warwicks with a duplicator, so it's looking pretty good. And now he's looking for, I believe, a Quicksilver, because Quicksilver is the other most important item on Warwick in general. We're gonna go ahead and roll, and he's still rolling until Charm sees We rolled past Trenchcoat. We rolled past some other stuff. We just pick up the Voidling because I think we want to stop here at 30. And this is actually a really important note for reroll, which is he was really close to Warwick 3. And he wanted to roll a little bit deeper below 50 because he is basically one off of Warwick 3, which is the most important thing. The problem is that if he rolls beyond 30 and he misses, then he's going to be in a spot where he needs to roll to charm to try to make his rolls efficient. But then he's really poor and he kind of throws away the opportunity to make his gold back quickly and then also push levels. And so he's staying above 30 because that's like his new threshold to still make 3 gold a turn, which is still decent because that gives you a roll and a half, and that should get you to a charm, which you could theoretically use to econ back up if it's a good charm. He takes these gloves though because it's a little bit on the expensive side, but he has a good unit to put it on, which is Olaf. And then if you can finish this round on a 4 streak, that'd be huge. And I mean, this is pretty impressive because remember, he's big gain stacking. He's also stacking the Olaf early, so it's all working really nicely together. And look at that. Warwick ain't bad. It's just Rageblade Warwick. It's just Infinity Edge Twitch. He's playing kind of a unique setup that a lot of people recommend against, which is like spreading his items out. But the setup is good. It was also worth noting too that he was also 7 Twitches. So like he was rolling to hit Twitch 3 or Warwick 3. And because he was 7-7, it's just one of those things where you just don't want to dip too low and miss. Because if you miss, your game is much, much harder, I think. All right, we drop a Titans. Titans is actually Warwick's other good item here. And he goes for double Rageblade. Oh, wow. Okay, so he rolls. Now he's just 1 Warwick off. Just needs to find 1 more Warwick. And just needs to find 1 more Warwick. And just needs to find 1 more Warwick. Okay, a little pricier than we wanted. And that's a good thing, actually, for us to learn, because that way it's not too high roll. He did find 2 Olafs on 5, which is also a very fortunate thing. But the most important thing is finding 1 Olaf, because then you can get like the big gains. So 2 Olafs actually is a little bit troll because sometimes it like griefs your economy. But I think ultimately he's happy about this. He's also holding these extra Vanguards because those are the units he wants to play for. Okay, so Item Collector, Horde Grabback, and 3's a crowd. Item Collector is a little bit worse than usual. There's 2 things about it that I want to say. The first is your team gets 20 HP, but you already have something like that with big gains. And so part of the first half of Item Collector is the HP, but we don't really need that nearly as much. And then also we get this ability power and attack damage for each unique item. And we have 2 Rage Blades. That's going to be a little bit reduced value. It's still going to be a fine take, I think, but it's just not nearly as good as it usually is. An Item Collector is a solid 4-2 combat augment that he could probably hold as his backup option if he wants to. Horo Grabbag is functionally useless. He already hit, and it would just be to hit Twitch 3 and maybe use it on a Mordekaiser 2. And at this point, the important thing is he hits Warwick 3, so I don't think it's this. You don't want to give up an entire strong combat augment that'll let you have a bunch of scaling just so you can hit like more 2. Here's a crowd is something you can think about. You basically want to compare it to the average amount of strength that you get from another augment. So Three's a Crowd was compared to in the past of an HP augment like Cybernetic Bulk. Or in this set, I'd probably say an HP augment you could think about comparing it to is Mentorship. Mentorship gives you about 200 HP and attack speed. So it would probably want to give you a little bit more than that. So Three's a Crowd would probably want to play 4 3 costs for you to kind of get to a spot where that feels really good. And that's not really played in any comp except for Blasters, which is played around Hui, Hecarim, Shen, and Ezreal. And I think that's probably a Three's a Crowd board. Probably not this one because you would play Mordekaiser and that's it. So probably not Three's a Crowd. He rolls options 2 and 3. And I think support cash is something he could take. It is important to note that support cash is a little bit more awkward when you already have a support golem, because it might make positioning really weird if you find another adjacent item. So let's say he has Banshees. Banshees is going to make it very, very awkward for his Warwick to get value, as well as like the Knight's Vow. So there's a little bit of that. Support cash would have been much better if you took immovable objects, and you can get 2 Randuins, and both of them actually have movable object value. So that would have been a really nice value add there. Hunter Crest is probably not pickable because you want to either go for 6 Hunter or 2. And I think because of what we described before, Warwick isn't a hunter, and you don't want to use an item slot like that on a Hunter Crest unless you go for 6. So I don't think it's Hunter Crest right now. Oh, he actually rolls option 1, and so he gets Winter is Coming, but he's not playing Vertical Frost, so it looks like it has to be support cash here then. That's really interesting. I didn't expect him to do that. Looks at his support armory, and he gets Unstable Treasure Chest, Zizirot Portal, Zephyr and Virtue the Martyr. Right away, I'm pretty sure the best one is Zephyr because of the reasons we talked about. Zephyr is really good at dealing with solo frontline that can give Warwick problems. Also, it's really good because you just get so many free item removers now, so you can get up to 2 snipes for free. The way to do that is you just look at who you load up in. If Callista or Rise or Varus, for example, is top left, you just put the Zephyr onto your Twitch and then you item remove it for the next round. So that way you can do it again, and then you get an item remover for the next PV round. So it's actually like kind of insane. So those 2 reasons are really, really good for Zephyr. The other option you can consider taking is Virtue of the Martyr, and that has good synergy because you have so much HP through big gains. Virtue of the Martyr is a percent-based healing, so the more HP you get, the more you get off of Virtue of the Martyr. But I don't think he already has one, and I just think Zephyr is like too good. So I think I'm be leaning over towards Zephyr if I was him. Okay, this is going to be a Zephyr pick, and he levels to play for his 4th Vanguard. I like that he's not in a rush to try to, like, you know, force a 6 Vanguard situation here, and he's also holding on to extra Blitzcranks in case he hits Blitzcrank 3 over time. You never know if you get like a Assemble or anything else to help you get there. He Zephyrs the Hecarim, which is totally fine because he just doesn't want to make Warwick get ganged up on. So now he's just playing, you know, just one-on-one with Warwick. And now Warwick 3 is scaling so fast with a double support. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I feel like support cash kind of makes sense if he's able to get something like Zephyr, because ultimately the team is Warwick, and support cash and support golem and all these different kind of support items are there to try to just help make one unit a super duper carry. It doesn't matter like anybody else on this board. I mean, I guess he does have a Twitch 3, which is nice for support DPS, but for the most part, it's like everybody exists just to feed Warwick. Look at this excellent Zephyr. He actually did something pretty cool. He showed Zephyr in the top left, and at the very last second moved it into the corner to try and snipe his opponent. So really nice job there to delay the Varus. Any opportunity you can to delay Varus ends up being usually a round win. So really, really big heads up play there from Wasian. All right, so all of his Warwick items are done. He could actually end up going for a glove and go for a Quicksilver delayed and then Rage Blade the Twitch in the back. That is one option. I do think Quicksilver is more important right now in the meta because of things like Tom Kench being so prevalent and other really big CCs like Zillion that can give Warwick a lot of problems. So it's something for him to think about. And as a result, he might not slam something like this Ruden's Hurricane, even though it's a pretty good item. It's just hard for him to deal with some of those CC units if he gets stuck. He actually puts units in both corners, so that way he has options to put Zephyr onto whichever units that it'll end up lining up with. So he puts Twitch in the bottom right to get the Varus here. If there's like a big threatened unit in the other corner, he would be Zephyring his Mordekaiser. And in terms of what units he's choosing to Zephyr, he's putting the weakest units like a Mordekaiser 1 versus a Blitzcrank 2. That Mordekaiser 1 is not really going to do much, so just having a unit that you don't really care that much about can be really clutch. He gets a temporary emblem, and he actually levels off cadence. You notice that he's 2 out of 48. And I think that's smart because he's already on an 8 streak. And he wants to just finish out the round with a win streak because he gets double interest. He gets interest now, and he gets interest at 4-7. So this is like one of those rare plays where, you know, doing something a little bit unconventional is actually quite strong. And if he's able to get rewarded with a win, that'd be huge. But I do think he's running into that one problem we talked about. He's running into Callista, and he actually couldn't even get to the Warwick in time. If you just rewind and look at this fight, this Warwick ended up kind of getting stunned, and that ends up being a huge problem later on in the fight. All right, looks like we lost our streak here to a Callista player. But again, this is going to be like one of the tough matchups that we're going to encounter regularly throughout the game. The good news is it seems like Callista players are low HP. It's possible that they just kind of kill off each other and we only have to face one, and we might be able to kind of fish for things like a good Zephyr to potentially swing a fight late. Right now, the only thing that I notice that we're really missing is anti-heal. So he's probably saving the bow for a red buff, and he's ideally going for a Quicksilver for Warwick. He also can just choose to go against the grain and not play for a Warwick Quicksilver, but I do think it's the best possible item for him to just stop getting CC'd late. He also can reforge right here before you choose to make an item, because let's say it's like half of a Morello. He can take one of the other side of the item, so he can make his decision before he slams his item here. He gets a glove though, so a little bit unfortunate. And another thing too is that he had to use his remover for that Rage Blade on Warwick, so this Zephyr is functionally stuck on the Twitch for the entire stage. And that's something that he consciously made a decision of. And I think that's actually okay. I think a lot of times people try to greed too much to try to like nail the perfect Zephyr. But a lot of times with these kinds of reroll compositions, you have to keep in mind that you're going to fall off late stages. Like there's a lot of other people who are going to be stronger because they're going to cap around 5 cost. They're going to hit Morgana 2, the Diana 2, hit the Milio 2, whatever they're playing for, and you're just playing, Warwick and Twitch, you're not going to win the game really often. And so winning these rounds when you're playing reroll is really crucial. At this point, he's pretty much guaranteed at least top 5 based off his HP advantage. And he can just kind of hope that these people with low HP are going to just eventually queue into each other and be forced to kill each other off. Oh my goodness gracious. This is actually an insane outplay. He actually Zephyrs the Callista and forces Warwick to move into the top corner. And because of that, this is a tough matchup that should actually be almost unwinnable. But by sniping the Callista, now this Rakan has no damage to actually kill everything, and he wins the fight. That was actually so insane. I want to watch it again. The way that Wasian forced the Warwick to go into the top right is through a traffic jam positioning. Usually he runs into a problem by having too many melee units. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units, and there's only 7 hexes. And so if he was going up against an equal melee comp that was spread across the front line, one of these units wouldn't be able to walk up. In fact, there's a chance that he loses to 50-50 and Warwick ends up not walking up at all, and this golem takes a priority. But in this situation where he's solo frontlined, you end up creating a situation where all 7 of these units end up walking. And because these 2 units are closest to Rakan, Olaf's going to walk up here and confront the Rakan. Mordekaiser walks up to the right of Rakan because Rakan's not going to move since they're already attacking the Rumble. And then this golem's going to wrap all the way around and go into this hex spot between Morgana and Rakan, which means that Warwick is going to be forced to walk this way, and the closest unit is technically Rakan, the Lilia. And then once Lilia dies, then he actually targets the next closest unit, which happens to be the Callista. An incredible positioning outplay that actually leads to a crucial round victory, which could actually lead to a really top finish, because you never know if this ends up dealing a critical blow to a Callista player that's, low on HP, that ends up killing them or putting them near death. To borrow a line from Freak, this is what separates the good versus the greats, and I think this is what makes Wasian a great player. Now, as much as I basically glaze this play, this is not going to work every single time, and there are ways for people to counterplay it. So if you just try to do this every single fight, you might run into a situation where people catch on to it, and then they wall out your own Warwick, or Warwick gets stuck. Like against that Warrior player, for example, it may or may not work. Again, it actually worked exactly the way we were hoping it in this situation, because by jamming the Warwick into a spot where he kills a unit, there's no more room for him to walk towards the center, so he just is forced to go in the corner. He's still looking for anti-heal source, so Sunfire might actually be the best course of action here. But he could also take blue buff and try to go for blue buff onto Twitch later on as well. Blue buff is really good on Twitch. And he's probably just going to have to sit with his blue buff on the bench and eventually remove the Zephyr off of the Twitch, which actually creates a little bit of issues with how he wants to Zephyr corner units, but we'll have to see how he actually tackles that. If he does know that his opponents are going to try and wall out Warwick, he can actually Zephyr things like this Shen and force the Warwick to run around anyways. Man, I'm looking at it right now, and it looks like there's no one that's trying to box Warwick out, and they're too busy positioning for other matchups, and this is what's making this Warwick really problematic to deal with, and he's already top 4. A Tom Kench 2, now that all the players are dead, like Lumen and Soju, and it's looking like this is going to be more than a 4th. Like, a lot of times you play this Warwick Reroll with no artifact and you're like, okay, maybe I can get like a top 4. Looks like he's actually going to go for even more than that. Okay, this Zephyr he actually misses, but I think the raw power level of this comp is just too high for the Varus to actually burst down. So I think we're scaling too much. The big gains is like too high at this point, and now we're just starting to run over level 9 Varus board straight up. Like this is starting to get to the point where we're snowballing out of control. We're waiting for the remover to get the remover off of the Twitch. Then we're probably going to have to use Zephyr onto probably like a unit like Mordekaiser or Galio again, maybe Blitzcrank as well. If we do find a way to get to 9, we probably try to play Arcana for Xerath if we can and get a little bit of Arcana value. We also could try and roll for Olaf 3. Okay, we open our Anvil, and I think he's thinking about like a 3rd item on Twitch, like just going for Deathblade, which is much stronger than Rageblade. I mean, this Rageblade was functionally just an item to help us get through our early mid game to scale the Warwick. And so now this Rageblade is kind of useless. His opponent's trying to actually wall out the Warwick. Okay, so rewinding a little bit, you can see that his opponent tried to counterplay a solo frontline Rakan by walling out the Warwick. And it sets up a 50-50 where either the Golem or the Warwick can walk up. In this case, the Warwick does walk up, but then the Golem can't do anything. And funny enough, he ends up Zephyring the Rakan. And by Zephyring the Rakan, the Blitzcrank walks to the top left. And then the Golem somehow waltzes all the way towards the Callista and forces the Callista to dash towards the middle. And Callista has a really interesting thing about when she's casting, she will dash 1 hex towards safety. And incidentally, what this ends up doing is that it ends up having this Callista dash towards the Warwick. And I don't think this was entirely intentional, but I think that a consequence of the way techs end up positioning end up sabotaging him completely, and the Warwick somehow finds his way to the Callista anyways. So sometimes you end up playing yourself. If you're going up against Warwick, maybe it's best not to get too fancy. Just do like a simple try to position and keep Callista safe, and maybe you end up doing less damage to yourself. Oh my gosh, we're doing a crazy salvage turn to try and get the optimal items onto our champions. I don't think he actually ended up doing this correctly because I think he really needed to get the Rage Blade off, but that's okay. Like it looks like he ends up just kind of going for actual items on Olaf instead of Thief's Gloves, and I think that's okay. Also, I don't think he positioned correctly, and this is actually something to note, is that sometimes you get a little bit caught by the salvage turn, and he didn't Zephyr the way he wanted to. If we were paying much more attention, we probably would have ended up swapping sides and having Warwick be closer to the Varus, and maybe try find a way to burst through the left side to get to the back line. Because the longer we let the opponent scale, like keep them away from Varus and Xerath, the more they're going to scale and deal damage to us. So this ended up being kind of an unfortunate loss and sort of like caught because we were doing too much salvager plays. It's okay though, we're top 2. And this is sort of tough. Now that your opponent knows you're trying to Zephyr and knows your setup, I wonder how Wasian's going to try to navigate around it. Throws in Arcana for the charm, tries to go top left. One thing that's important to note is that if he Zephyrs in front of the Warwick loses targets, and then he ends up walking all the way around. That's exactly what happened with his trench coat as well. Very smart positioning by the opponent, by Biri, because by having the trench coat pop out, Warwick loses the next target he could run to. And so Biri is actually effectively trapped off the Warwick from being able to blitz through, because as the unit is separating, Warwick can't interact with those units. And so it's technically creating like a wall for him that he can't burst past. Biri, I think, is denying this Deathblade, but it also happens to be on a Xerath. So he's going to tech in the Hecarim to try and get the Arcana Charm onto Hecarim for the AD and the durability. But I don't think that's enough. I wonder if this is a situation where you actually maybe even consider teching out of Vanguard. Finally goes to Salvager and gets the remover so that way he can go for a red buff. A lot of complicated turn here. And he ends up winning this fight, which I think was really, really huge. And I think this shows you like the importance of like the anti-heal. Rolls past target dummies, too much melee traffic jam. Finds another Salvager. So it looks like he's going to go for the red buff finally. I think like he can just correct his previous mistakes. So red buff, no trench coat onto the Rumble this time. That was just a charm temporarily. And so Warwick can actually kill. Finds his way onto the left side again. And again, that's like a huge part of it because last time he wrapped all the way around and Warwick was in Narnia in the top right. So once you get Warwick onto the top corner, it works. At this point, we've remade our items many times over. Unfortunately, he actually left his cloak at home, so I think he would prefer to make Bloodthirster as opposed to Gunblade. And now all we have to do is win one more fight and we're home free with the first. But combat charm wise, well, interesting. He's going to mix up and goes to the far right side. So he predicts that Biri might side swap. So he tries to go for a far right swap to maybe mix it up. And it's looking promising. It's looking promising. Oh no, this aftershocks. His opponent has, I think Biri got Tremors, which is stunned every 8 seconds. So it ends up being a really, really powerful charm that actually interrupted. So it wasn't aftershock, it was actually multiple stuns. So at this point, the charm is everything. Then it looks like it's coming down to like who has the better charm. Barrier is acceptable, but I think he wants something like stronger. He is playing Castfest, but he takes Barrier. Oh, his opponent hit Morgana too. That's going to be really tough. And they hit Lightning Strike Dummy. I think their setup is a lot stronger than ours. We do get the Zephyr onto the Varus, though, which is nice. If Warwick can get over to the top left. Oh, Morgana's really difficult to deal with. It's so close. Oh, dear. Okay, really, really good attempt. But, you know, the fight was winnable in a couple of directions. And I really think that he did a good job navigating a tough game. So overall, really well done by Wasian. And I think that was a really well played game. So I hope that game goes to show you that there's a lot of nuance to reroll, even more than just like, okay, I'm going to click the artifact that's best for Warwick and force Warwick. I mean, doing that maximizes your AVP, but there are other things that you can do to gain edge, even if you don't have the optimal setup. Really well played by Wasian, and goes to show you that there's even more depth to some of these comps than we give it credit for. Hope you guys learned a thing or two. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.